Fitzpatrick touched on that I loved, because I haven't heard many other pros like make this case, is if you are a faster player, if you're someone who is kind of aware of your surroundings, there's a pressure to keep your group in position, even when you are not the one who's causing the issue. And so, like, ADDC clearly didn't care about that. He's not feeling that pressure. That's not affecting him. It is affecting Fitzpatrick. And that's not how it should work. The guy who's being quote unquote penalized without any real penalty strokes should not be the one who's actually helping the group be in position. It should be the guy who's slowing them down. So I think that the tour needs to take Fitzpatrick's lead here and stop caring about people's feelings so much and actually penalize guys for that disgraceful of slow play.
At Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, the Houston Open DraftKings picks and preview. Plus, what I want to start with this week is what to do when you're not winning at DraftKings Golf. Alex Blickle from FTN Fantasy has thought about this far more than I have. Then maybe just try to make better picks. Is that the solution? Just pick better guys?
Definitely, to a degree, the solution is pick better guys. But yeah, it's a really fun conversation. I think it's a valuable conversation, and it's one that's definitely applicable to my start to the season so far, especially over the last month or so. I feel like I haven't played my best DFS, and that's shown in my results.
I've been up and down. I've had a few good weeks. I've had some pretty bad weeks. I had a very bad week at the Valspar. So that's 2 in a row. Players, Valspar. One of the things that I used to talk about with this over the years is that, and maybe you have a different feel for it, that I usually do really well on the West Coast swing. And then we get to Florida, and Florida golf is just, it's more random than most of the other tournaments throughout the course of the year. Not to take anything away from bad picks that I'm making, but there does seem to be a higher degree of variance with these water heavy events versus a lot of the Texas events or West Coast events where we just don't get that.
Definitely true. And I think historically, like, I've been able to use that to my advantage. So the Florida swing has actually been very kind to me over the years. Not so much this year, but I think that's a really good segue into the main point that I want to talk about here with this discussion, which is what actually, results in DFS success, and how does that differ from some other aspects of life. And so, like, for me personally, it's really easy for me to compare, DFS to golf. So for example, when I'm playing in a US Open sectional, it's somewhat similar to trying to get a takedown in DFS. Right now, I've had thousands of opportunities to get takedowns, so I have a fair amount of them, whereas I haven't gotten into US Open ever before, because I've only had 5 chances to do so. So the main point here is, like, when I'm playing in a US Open sectional, I have to come in prepared, and then throughout the day, I have to execute golf shots. I have to be disciplined. I have to be poised under pressure. I have to, be very focused and emotionally strong and psychologically resilient for 11 straight hours, right? I can't luck my way into anything. I have to just go and do the thing. Whereas in DFS, getting a takedown is not something you go actively do. It's something that kind of happens to you or happens for you. And DFS success is largely, for any one given day, a product of luck, right? And so the best lineups, the best lineups make it so that you need the least amount of luck in order to get the outcome that you're looking for, which is a takedown. And over time, of course, that's a skill, right? Building lineups that require the least amount of luck over time is a skill, whereas in any one given day, in order to get that takedown, you need luck. You can't luck your way, or I can't luck my way into getting through sectionals. It's not something that happens to me. It's something that I have to go actually do. And so that to me is like the biggest thing that I want to talk about here. And it kind of leads into the number one mistake that I see people make, which is they try a little bit too hard to make the takedown, or even just like a day where they cash. They really try and make it happen instead of building a lineup that allows it to just happen to them.
Well, I used to talk to Colin Drew about this when Drewby was still a big-time player and having some showdown takedowns, one of the better players over the past 10 years or so. So shout out Drewby if you're watching. I haven't talked to you in ages. But in golf, it's so much different than, it's more akin to football than anything else, because you get it once a week. That, yeah, I've had 2 bad tournaments in a row. That's 2 bad nights of NBA. If you had 2 bad nights of NBA playing a full slate, going full go the same budget that you would put in for golf, and you had 2 bad nights in a row. Would you call it a losing streak? Or would you be like, oh man, that sucks. Let me get back on it today?
Yeah, exactly. And you can stretch that out to any point, right? So like even if, the last 2 months you haven't had a good PGA DFS week, that's like a week and a day for MLB DFS or NBA DFS. So I love that point. And then the other thing that I'll note is like you can also kind of look not just at the overall results, but results of some individual plays that you had to kind of get a sense of whether or not you've been on the right track. So for example, like my showdown success over the last few weeks hasn't been great, but I've had slates where I've had a phenomenal core, and I just needed, the last one or two guys in my lineup to do reasonably well, and they stunk. And then the next day, I had a core that didn't really perform that well, but everyone that I surrounded that core with was great. And so I didn't have a good day in either of those 2 days, but I know that, okay, if I had just flipped that around, right, one lineup would have been terrible, the other would have been excellent, and then I would be really happy with my success over the last couple of weeks instead of having both of them min cash instead of doing anything really well. So that I think is another way to kind of look and evaluate things.
When does it get to the point where you need to change your process? Or is it more about reflecting on what you've been doing and trying to clean up the edges? Because obviously, what you've been doing for a sample of years now has been working. And for me, it's give or take. I don't take it as seriously as most people. I just enjoy, sitting on the can and making some lineups and going about my business. But I do have a strategy to what I'm doing. And I find that and Tambo and I used to talk about this extensively, that I'm going to pick a lane and I'm going to go with that lane. If I'm right, I'm going to get paid. If I'm wrong, I'm not going to win 80% of my money back. I'm probably going to lose 95% of the money that I put on during that slate.
I think that number one is actually a really good strategy. And one like maybe piece of advice that I'd give is try and have as much consistency as possible with the type of lane that you're choosing. So like you don't want one week to be I'm going with proximity from 150 yards as my lane that I want to attack, right? Maybe your lane is you're consistently looking for wave advantages in PGA DFS, and if you can just always be on the lookout for wave advantages, make sure you never miss out on the opportunity for that type of correlation. That could be a really productive and effective just approach that you always take, and I think that is sort of the second mistake that I see people make here, which is in kind of an extension of the first mistake, just trying too hard to make results happen immediately, is they consistently change from one lane to the next. And we can actually kind of zoom out here and talk about this in a number of different ways. So it's not just about how they're picking players, but it might be like, they haven't been successful. So this week they're trying a new DFS provider. And that week they didn't have success. So that DFS provider gets crossed off the list, and now they're signed up for a new DFS provider. And they just kind of cycle through until basically saying, okay, once I find the right DFS provider, it's going to guarantee me success in every single week. That type of magic button, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's DFS provider, the stats that you're looking at, the balance between chalk and contrarian guys, there is no magic button that's going to lead to success. It's all about just maximizing the probability of success over time and recognizing the fact that in any given week, any given slate, the most likely outcome is that you're going to lose your money, and that's true for even the best DFS players in the world.
I think that's really the part that I want to hammer down on, that a lot of people who have been watching the show for years understand that, because they've been through the hot streaks, the cold streaks, and just playing on a week in and week out basis. But I know there's a lot of people still, although it doesn't seem that way, that there are still people jumping into it or even just playing so casually that would be watching the show. There are. I hear from these people all the time. Like, I've lost the last 3 weeks. Should I keep playing? It's like, well, maybe not. Maybe you'll never win. Maybe you're not making good picks. Maybe you're not doing the elements of strategy that you need to do. Or it's 3 weeks. It's 3 slates. I've played, like, even in props, for example. Like we run the simulations, and then we have the probability and the EV. Like, how many times have you played 3 consecutive props that were probably, that you had rated as a 71% winner, and all 3 of them lost? It happens.
It absolutely happens. And to your point there, like, it's the expectation that it's going to happen sometimes, right? If you're picking something that is a phenomenal pick and you're saying, this is so good, it's 70% likely to happen, you're also saying it's going to lose 3 out of 10 times. And so, that's, and that, by the way, where like I see some really kind of ridiculous over the top conversations, not on DFS Twitter, thankfully, but on betting Twitter. We've talked about this before. Like betting Twitter is a cesspool compared to DFS Twitter, thankfully. Um, at betting Twitter, sometimes you'll see people like, brag about the fact that they're hitting props at 100% or something like that. It's like, well, if you're saying that these props that I'm choosing are 60% likely to win and they all hit 90% of the time, guess what? Your model wasn't correct. Your model said it was going to win 60%, not 90%. So you still, have some work to do there. And obviously that screams that the person claiming that their 90% success rate is a bit of a fraud and a scam, but that's that's a different conversation. But yeah, I think to bring this back to DFS, it is very much worth consistently reminding yourself that I am not supposed to have success all the time, and I'm supposed to go through stretches. And personally, like I play a very contrarian style. I'm always trying to maximize my chance for a top 1% finish. I need to be aware of the fact that not only can I sometimes go through extended periods without a takedown and without any type of even intermediate step of success, like a nice cash or a top 10 finish. I need to be aware of the fact that like that's going to happen, and I expect it to happen, and I can't if I let that instance affect my style of play and my strategy and the way that I'm approaching DFS slates, I'm then going to be moving away from success. And that doesn't mean that we can't do things to improve. It just means we have to be very kind of picky and careful about the things that we actually do to try and improve the process.
One of the strategies that I've tried to use over the years, if I'm trying to change up something, is I really try to take advantage of that 50 cent 150 max golf tournament. That if I like, because for a while I was playing 20 lineups in the 5, and then I was like, oh, I'll play 20 lineups in the 25. It's like maybe I'd do better if I played 50 lineups. And then I found I was just burning money because I had no cohesive strategy week to week. But I took like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and tinkered around with a few different strategies between 25, 150 lineups just to see what was better for me. But I only ever played the 50 cent max the weeks that I was doing that, just so I wouldn't lose all of my money, because that it can become a money pit if you're going to mass multi-enter. Or there are sometimes that I've gone through periods, like even like 2 years, where I would just build 3 lineups a week and I'd play them in the big 25, the big 5, whatever it is, but I play each of them in like a 150 single end or 3 max or $100 single entry or the 254 max. But I'd really just try to concentrate on building 3 lineups rather than picking a pool of players and building different styles of lineups and entering 80, whatever it might be. And I think that it has to be different for everyone, doesn't it? Like you might be great at building 150 lineups. You might be great at building 1 lineup versus everyone else who builds 1 lineup. I think knowing what kind of player you are, and that's really how I've struggled with this for a long time, is that I really don't know what kind of player I am. I do know that most of my profitability tends to come from playing 1 entry in a single entry, well, obviously, or like a 3 max or a 4 max, whatever it might be, and playing it as a single entry versus, the every 3-year spike I might get in the $5 or $25. Usually that's just a loss leader for me.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest myths kind of in DFS, which is the more lineups that you build, the better chance you have of success because you just have more, kind of bullets. Because typically when you're building that many more lineups, you're competing against a significantly higher amount of people. And so I think this is a bit of a different conversation for people who have yet to find the thing that makes them successful, and for people who have had success and are just kind of undergoing a cold streak. I think the best advice that I can give to newer people, to that group of people who haven't yet found what they're really really good at, the first thing I'd say is don't base what you think works well for you on what has been successful for you in the past. I think base it instead on what you feel most comfortable with, what you feel most confident in as you're building the lineup. So if you've built one lineup and you think, man, I know that I built a good lineup this week, that to me is a better indicator than how that lineup ended up doing. And similarly, like if you build 20 lineups and you say, I know that I have a really good strategy here. I have a really good mix of different types of strategies in each lineup. I know that these 20 lineups kind of sum to the 20 lineups are better than the sum of their just individual values. Then even if you haven't had success doing that, if that's what you know that you can do well, then stick to that. So kind of evaluate that with how you feel about it once you've made the lineups and not just on the results. And the last thing I'll say here is I'll compare it to pick 'em and props. So one of the changes I made this year was about a month ago, I had hit, I think it was like 53% of my free throw props this year. And this is a prop type that last year I hit at 61.7%. So like I knew free throws are an advantageous bet to make. I know the theory behind it really, really well. I know the fact, the mean and the median are very different. And so I'm getting nice lines that way. So I knew that like the thesis of betting on free throws and particularly on free throw unders was strong. And I just hadn't had as much success this year as I had last year. So I said, okay, well, what's something that I can do to tweak this a little bit and to potentially, improve going forward on these pick types. And so one of the things I did was I started to do a little bit deeper research into NBA officiating and the stats of, which officiating crews call more fouls than others and things of that nature. And it doesn't always work like this. In fact, it rarely works out this well, but immediately once I made that change, I hit 22 of my next 23 free throw props. And it was phenomenal. And obviously it doesn't always work that way, but I can say that in that time, the officiating data did take me off of some picks that I otherwise would have been on that lost. And it did put me on some picks that I otherwise would have said, no, this isn't quite strong enough, that won. And so like it did make a meaningful difference, even though I still would have had a really nice stretch in that time. And again, like it's very, very rare that a change that you make, a tweak that you make is going to have that immediate of an effect. And that's why in DFS, like when you try to implement some kind of change, whether it's trying a new DFS provider or this week I'm going to spend a little bit more time, looking at approach buckets and who does really well from what bucket and how that relates to what this course typically asks of players. You shouldn't evaluate whether that was a good decision or a bad decision, or whether you should stick to that going forward based on whether or not you won that week. Because again, wins in DFS, even just cashes, right? Like even if you're a really good DFS player, you're only going to cash like 1 out of 4 lineups or something like that. So, and then of course the takedowns are what, 3 out of 100. You're going to get a top 1% finish, something like that. So yeah, I think this is a really fun conversation, and the biggest thing is just keeping everything in perspective and letting the success happen to you as opposed to trying too hard to go make it happen.
Even on that same note, like I was big on AJ Ewert last week. I had him as top Canadian. That was awesome at 16 to 1. I also had a top 10 on him that would have paid 50 to 1. Do you know what he came last week?
I know that he won you some money.
He did. He beat Corey Connors by a stroke because he tied for 11th place.
That's great. And so that's a great reminder of something else I want to talk about here. Like I had conviction on Sungjae this past week, and I didn't end up playing him. And it's kind of weird to say that I had conviction on Sungjae because he didn't really show us any reason to have conviction on him. But essentially, my conviction was this is a player who historically is a very good iron player. We know he's great off the tee, really good short game, good putter. He's the complete player, except for the fact that last year he was one of, if not the single worst iron players on tour. And then he missed time with an injury. It's a little bit unclear of how related the injury was to his iron struggles. Certainly, they can be very connected, especially because I think it was a wrist injury. So, that has certainly an effect with the way that he's going to interact with the turf once he makes contact, things of that nature. So essentially, my point was the chance that he's going to gain strokes with his irons over the next month is significantly higher than it was at any point last season when he was so clearly struggling with that skill set. And if he turns that around even a little bit, he goes from a guy who his spikes last year were 20th place to a guy who's going to contend once again to win tournaments. And so while he was as cheap as he was last week and 2% owned, he was a really strong play. Now, I didn't end up playing him. Why? Because I was falling into that trap of trying to make it happen instead of letting the takedown in the really good week happen to me, because I knew I have to get lucky for Sungjae to actually be really good. Like he hasn't shown me any signs, so I'm not able to predict the fact that he's going to do this. I'm just saying I think the possibility exists, and it's greater than his price and ownership indicates. So if I use him and get lucky, then I'm going to be in position for a takedown. And I didn't go that route. And so that was an example of me making this mistake that I'm talking about of not just letting the takedowns and the really good kind of DFS outcomes happen for me and trying to go make them happen a little bit too much.
And to the point I was making about Ewert coming in T11 is I had a top 10 bet on this guy who would have paid off at 50 to 1 had he have got there. And he came T11. I mean, I lost the bet. Feel like it was a good bet.
It's an outstanding bet. Yeah, your read on it was awesome. And Tom and Marty, that that research that he did paid off. So good on him. Good on you for listening.
Yeah, but the whole point being that, like, obviously I look at my bank account, big zero underneath that bet. But directionally, I feel like, okay, I've been pretty good at the bottom of the board. You're going to hit grenades everywhere. There's a reason that these guys are 300 to 1 or $6,500. Like, my best lineup last week did have Ewert in it. It was like a 5-1 onslaught with Ewert. The problem was I didn't have the right guys at the top. And when we think back to last week, what lineups got there last week at the Valspar? I assume they were they Xander Fitz lineups, or was it like the Fitz, Brooks, Spieth, and you had to have two of those like goobers who finished inside the top 10?
Yeah, they were kind of it was a weird mix in that sense. And honestly, like the Xander lineups looked like they didn't have much chance at going into the last day. And then he obviously had that fantastic round. Frustrating because I've been on Xander and Fitz so much this year. And I had Xander on the main slate, but the rest of the lineup wasn't good enough. And it's been one of those seasons for me too, which I think is another indicator of I'm on the right track. I'm just not getting the results, which is like I just keep being a week or two early on guys over and over and over again. And for some guys, I'm like 3 weeks early and 2 weeks early and 1 week early, but I'm not on him the week that I actually need him. So that is a good sign, even though I haven't had the big DFS hit yet. I think another kind of important point here to your Ewert discussion, it would be very easy for someone to react to the very narrow miss that you just had on him with the top 10 to say, okay, since I missed on the top 10, but he was so good, maybe I should have also had top 20 and top 40 to make sure if I'm right that it's really paying off. But sometimes, number one, the thesis isn't that he's going to play well. The thesis is he's got a really good chance of spiking. And so you want the top 10 upside, and maybe you don't want the top 40, which is more of like a median outcome for him. And that extends to DFS, with people often saying, oh man, I built one lineup this week and it was so close. It just had this one miscut. Maybe if I had 3 lineups and I had just changed that last player, one of them would have really hit. The problem with that is now you end up with 3 lineups. Maybe you're spending 2 times as much or 3 times as much. And to your point earlier, like it can become a money pit really quickly. So if you've got a process that works, or if you have conviction on someone and something, I think it really is better to just really hone in on that and accept the fact that you're going to have narrow misses, but narrow misses are an indication that you're on the right track.
Hopefully. And listen, it's funny that I can sit here and talk about this. He had to make a 15-foot birdie on 18 on Friday to make the cut after he had given it away. And then obviously he rallies on the weekend and gets there. He misses that putt on Friday, not even having this conversation. And, it's a really terrible pick at this point, but obviously it was close enough that he had a putt to make the cut and then get him there on the weekend, see what happens. This is where that luck factor comes in. It's no different than a couple. I would guess Ewert was probably in a couple of those like money winning lineups this week.
I would think so. And if he wasn't, it was only because his ownership was so low that it was just hard for him to actually be in one of the lineups that had everything else correct, because there were only so many lineups with the chance to do so. And that's such an awesome point with Ewert too, because it tells you how close it was for the top 20, top 40 made cut bets to be really bad, right? And so you were really close to this fantastic outcome with the top 10. You were also close to the possibility of a really bad outcome had you bet top 10, top 20, top 40 made cut and just really kind of went all in on him. And so I think that's a really good, example where just missing a top 10 bet, not a bad outcome. You're going to miss a bunch of those. Missing all of a top 10, top 20, top 40 made cut bet, those are bad unless you're then spending less overall. But now that also means your ceiling comes way down because you have to spend less on the top 10. So really good discussion. And I think it really carries over really well to DFS.
Starting something new is terrifying. I remember right before launching this show thinking, what if no one listens? What if it completely flops? And that's something that has persisted every time that I hit record and go to edit a show, even as I'm recording this right now. It never goes away. But taking that leap ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made. And honestly, having something like Shopify back then would have made it a whole lot easier. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses. Whether you're just getting started or scaling up, you can build a clean, professional store with ready-to-use templates that actually match your brand. No coding headaches. And it's not just a storefront. Shopify's got built-in AI tools to help write product descriptions, improve your pages, even upgrade your images. Plus, You can run email and social campaigns right from the platform like you've got a full marketing team behind you. That would have been great like 15 years ago, not gonna lie to you. Best part, everything lives in one place: inventory, payments, analytics, so you're not juggling 5 different tools to run your business. It's time to turn those what ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/PatMayo. Go to shopify.com/PatMayo. That's shopify.com/PatMayo. Think you know ball? Prove it on Underdog and bet the bracket. Build a tourney bracket for free and see if you can outlast the rest for a shot at $100,000 in prizes. If you're a bracket bust, don't worry. You can turn your bets into real money all tourney long with prediction markets on Underdog. Available right now in most states like California, Texas, and Florida. Head to the Underdog app and put your bets to the test. With prediction markets, you can bet on money lines, spreads, and totals throughout the tournament, all in one place in real time. New markets drop every round from the opening tip to the final buzzer. So, if you love college hoops and think you know how each round will unfold, Underdog is where you make your bets. Download the Underdog app today and use promo code MAYO to get started. Prediction markets on Underdog. Available in your state. Let's talk about the Houston Open Memorial Park. What do you make of the course? Because last year it played super easy. It was super soggy. There were preferred lies in play. Would you expect it to go back to being one of the more difficult courses on the tour?
I would, although I think we do need to wait and kind of see what conditions look like this year. It's nice that we had such a very clean explanation for why it played so much easier last year. This is it's also a course where the course fit model is very clear about what skill sets translate to success. And last year, even though it played so much easier, we did see that it was consistent, right? It was distance, approach play, and putting. And the only thing that's really changed throughout the years is how much each really matters over the others. But accuracy last year went to like almost no value whatsoever because it was so soft. And one of the guys in my Discord, Laxachusetts, I'll give him a nice shout out here. He also made the point that since this tournament moved from November, we now have overseed, and so the missed fairway penalty has dropped, and it's also made short games a little bit easier just because you don't have to deal with like the really unpredictable lies of Bermuda the way that you used to here. So from that standpoint, it's one of the easier weeks, I think, to predict. And it's just a matter of what the scoring conditions are actually going to be like.
So I think that's somewhat interesting. I find from just watching it back, giving the eye test on what's going on at this course, everything you've lined up agrees. I'm just all in on ball speed this year, that as long as the guys can do anything else, like if Gordon Sargent could putt, it would be great, but he can't. Him and Christo Lamprecht, one of those two guys are going to have a good week because they just absolutely mash it off the tee. But that's not the angle that I want to take. The around the green, there's so many shaved off runoff areas here. And like you said, with the overseed, I watched Keith Mitchell hit a spinner out of the rough last year and got it to stop next to the hole. I don't think I've ever seen that from the rough before.
Was that the what's it called?
It was on
tie spinner. Was that the tie spinner he hit?
No, he hit the tie spinner out of the sand that time.
Okay, that's the one.
Yeah, no, he was just he missed. It was on 17. I think it was on Saturday. He just missed his drive to the left. There's a big like shaved off runoff area. It ran through that into the rough, which was mowed down to like half an inch or whatever it was. Just you don't necessarily like. Usually, if someone's playing the ball out of the rough, you have to play it so it runs out, or you hit it high, and that's how you get to stop. Not here. Guys were just like, no, let me do whatever I want to the ball from this rough. I'm still gonna get it to spin. I'm still gonna get it to stop. And where a lot of these greens are, like they have the big drop off areas, a lot of false fronts. Like I find that's a different skill set at this course that maybe you don't see all that often on tour. And there's some guys that are good at it and some guys that are really bad at it. Because I've just watched so many guys. It's a very fun tournament to watch because if guys aren't hitting greens in regulation with the depth of some of these approach shots, guys miss a lot of greens that some of them don't seem like they have a clue what they're doing when they're chipping here.
I think that's fair. So how would you try to kind of put that into action?
I want to try to think of other courses that are similar. And listen, I think the one habit that we can get into that isn't very good is being like, well, Scottie came second here. Scottie comes like first or second everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I throw him out and just focus on the rest of the guys that have done well at this tournament over the years. Like if you're just dealing in only the best players, well, yeah, the best players play really well regardless of the course. It doesn't really matter for them. But the guys that I've seen do well here, like how does Toasty pop up here every year? What does Toasty do well? Well, he's super long off the tee, has one of the best ball speeds around, and he's played like Farmers, Mexico, Byron Nelson, Detroit. All these courses in Houston are hit it wherever you want off the tee, figure out the rest. So there's something to that, of that style of player that isn't going to be highly penalized unless you like Minwoo hit it into the water last year. That was a problem. Hit it anywhere else, you're usually pretty good to go. And where the course is so long, you want to be cutting off as much as the course as possible. But in my mind, for the around the green play, I was actually thinking more of, and it's why it gets all roads lead back to Marco Penge this week. But the Scottish Open, well, the courses are completely dissimilar. I did find that going back and looking at the green complexes here, these ones are more elevated, so you have to play like into the bump a little bit more. But links golf, I do think, gives you an advantage on these greens in particular. And there's probably more of this style of green in Texas than anywhere else, would be my guess.
I think that's probably true. I think to me, like the place that I would take this conversation is just pointing to the fact that what you're potentially describing is just why around the green play is a little bit less predictive here than many other places, because the skill itself is a little bit different than the typical skill of around the green play, where it's, you know, it's exactly how far are you carrying the pitch shot and how much spin are you applying, things of that nature, where now you have to be maybe a little bit more creative, or you have to, you know, this one is all about how far you're carrying the chip instead of just how far you're letting it run out, whatever the case may be. And if it takes predictive value away from around the green play, well, where's that predictive value going? And we know it's going to distance instead of accuracy, like more than anything else here. And so one of the ways that I like, you know, explaining what this means when we say it's more predictive or less predictive than usual, what does this actually mean? We'll take any two players, and let's say that typically, you know, player A projects half a stroke better than player B on a course, on a neutral course on the PGA Tour. Well, when distance is significantly more predictive than usual, and here it's about 50% more predictive. Let's say, you know, player B hits the ball further than player A to the point where he's typically gaining 0.3 strokes on this guy with distance alone. Well, that 0.3 stroke advantage needs to be multiplied by 1.5 here, because it's 50% more predictive than usual. So that 0.3 stroke advantage becomes 0.45. And now maybe this guy is less accurate than player A, and that matters less this week. So what typically is, you know, a half stroke advantage there becomes only a 0.1 stroke advantage for player A. And so all of a sudden on this course, player B projects better than player A. And so it's not like we aren't caring about projections. It's literally that the course fit is changing what we expect from each player based on what skills they are and are not good at.
I find that interesting that around the green didn't, maybe it doesn't hold predictive value because you just want to be hitting greens in regulation over having to chip in or chip it close a ton. I would think that would mean more if it was longer. But when you take a scan the leaderboard here, part of the like key to unlocking the players that have won in the past, and maybe it's just I'm only thinking about the winners, especially now since it's moved to March. You have Jaeger and you have Minwoo. Two guys that can mash it off the tee and have excellent short games. And their putter, Minwoo is a good putter. Jaeger is not a good putter. He putted well that week, but both of their around the, you can putt from off the green here too, which is another element.
Also true. One of the other interesting things that I found is, I think you were kind of getting at this a little bit. The model that I ran that does not include guys who miss the cut. So essentially this is just of guys who make the cut, what helps players get to the top. There's actually more around the green signal there than in who is making or missing the cut. And so I think you kind of nailed it there. Is like, if you're leaning too much on short game, it might tell you that you're just not good enough with your ball striking. You're not long enough. Your irons aren't good enough. So you're not going to, you know, have much of a chance that week. But among the players who do make the cut and they're trying to get to the top, short game does come into play. And especially last year, I think that's probably more an indication of how much it helped them score on birdie holes. So were you getting up and down on the par fives for birdie as opposed to settling for par than it is saving par on holes where you made a mistake, missed a green.
Even looking back at the leaderboard from a year ago, there's very few poor around the green players. Like Woodland is, but he also gained like 9 strokes putting. So what are you going to do? Yeah. Minwoo, plus player. Scheffler, plus player. Rory, plus. Wyndham Clark is a plus. Mac Hughes, obviously a plus. Steven Yeager, a plus. And Ryan Fox is up there. Eric Cole is there. These are all very good touch players from around the green. And some of the other ones, Pendrith ended up near the top, a big bomber. Valimaki was the weirdest one for me. He was just unconscious with his irons for like 3 straight days.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird week in that way. The other thing that really stands out to me as I kind of look through the data on this course throughout the years is how different it has played year to year, not just separating last year from the years where it was tougher, but I mean, we see some crazy spikes in the predictive value of approach play here. Around the green was massively predictive in 2022 after having no predictive value in 2020 or 2021. So there are some things that I kind of want to look through, and I'll obviously talk about this heavily in my Discord, and we'll share it with everyone at FTN and incorporate it into the projection models as best I can. If I find something that actually helps explain this, like, oh man, in 2020 this condition was in play, and we're actually going to see that again this year. But it's really weird. I mean, most events, like last week, for example, at the Valspar, we saw that course play almost identically in 2023, 2024, 2025. We just don't see weird total spikes in how the course is testing players very often. Although last week, like, that was actually one of the variables I think that helped explain why I had such a poor DFS week. Was last week, it was a big kind of deviation from what has historically been really predictive at Valspar. Last week, it was like all about driving accuracy and around the green play, and that hadn't really been the case. And so I made a note based on the conditions. It was breezy. We had a north wind for the first 3 days. If we get that again next year, I'm going to value accuracy and around the green play more than the course fit model tells me, and approach play less than the course fit model tells me, because as we kind of talked about a bunch throughout the weeks here, accuracy off the tee and approach play typically, steal signal from one another. So when one is really predictive, the other kind of can't be.
Did Lipsky hit a bunch of fairways? Is that what he like? I just assumed when I went back and looked at it. Let's see. It was all basically putting and around the green for Lipsky. I mean, this is going to play at any tournament as well. Same as Sungjae. Like, as the week went on, Sungjae had to rely more and more and more on chipping and putting until eventually that just stopped. Same thing happened to Brandt Snedeker. When you look at the guys that really pounded the ball really well, I mean, Fitz was top 10 in driving, second in approach. Like, that first tee to green. That's not shocking. Jordan Smith was second tee to green. He loses by 2 strokes. Griot rebounds in a big way, gets himself back up there. So tee to green and ball striking still were the prevalent themes of the week. It's just, most of the guys who ended up near the top of ball striking just lost a bunch of strokes putting. That it's not like Fitz gained a bunch on the greens. He just gained enough on the greens.
Yeah, he made a few really key putts, especially on 15 and 18 down the stretch. He has been knocking on the door of this win for so long now, really since like the second half of last season. Very, very nice to see him finally come through. And I think the biggest thing for him, and where I see like the most confidence in his game right now, it's not actually the iron play, which has been spectacular. It's he has a shot off the tee that he knows no matter the circumstance, he can put it in play. And it's interesting because you think of the one tee shot in the last few weeks where he really cost himself was the one on 18 against Cam Young there at Sawgrass on a right to left hole. And the go-to shot for him has been this low cut stinger, which he pretty much couldn't play on that hole. So that was a really interesting thing for me, but he is so automatic with that right now.
Really hope that he wins the Masters is where I'm getting at with this. He doesn't need to hit those. I mean, it helps to being a big drawer can only help on some of it, but he can hit his irons that way. It's just, you can't ask him to play a big draw off the tee, which he doesn't have to do at Augusta.
Well, and the thing is, like, his stock shot and his like max effort, max distance shot off the tee is a little bit of a draw. It's just this go-to fairway finder stinger that he's just hitting so incredibly well right now. and in pressure situations as well, is that really low stinger cut. And so that's been cool to see. And it shows up in his strokes gain off the tee as well, and the strokes gain driving accuracy, to be able to have a shot that you can hit when there's even more of a premium on hitting the fairway. And it's another reason why I don't think percentage of fairways hit is great, because he obviously is saying there are holes where hitting this one accurately, not having a big miss or putting it in the fairway, is significantly more important than other tee shots. And on those shots, he's got a shot that he can go to, and that makes him great in those high leverage situations.
Well, it's interesting that you say it that way, because I tried to explain this a little bit on the research show this week. But I went back and I looked at the strokes gained off the tee from this course a year ago. And guys gained, Minwoo didn't, out of all people, which is kind of hilarious. But when people are looking for flaws, like, it's funny because I waver on this, because I do use strokes gain data. I think it's probably the best of what we got to use, but understanding its flaws, I think, are there at the same time. Is just there's no context to any of these shots. Like last year, Minwoo lost off the tee. One of it was one really bad drive, but outside of that, he was hitting it exactly where he wanted to hit it. It just wasn't in the fairway.
Yeah, an awesome point. And I think kind of another example of that is, like, you get on some courses, like let's say Muirfield Village, where when you miss a green by a little bit, but on the wrong side, you're screwed. That's going to show up as not that bad of a miss with your iron play. And so, maybe negative 0.05 or something like that. And then a really bad short game shot because some other guys are getting up and down from further away from the hole, but that's because they were on the correct side of the hole. They had a chance to hit it close. You were on the wrong side. And so your best outcome was 15 feet by the hole. And so in those very small samples and from one week to the next, you can get, as you said, very flawed strokes gain data. But if you understand that, if you understand why that happens and kind of, what adjustment to make, then the strokes gain data is still spectacular. So I'm with you. I think strokes gain data is really, really good, even though it is flawed. All data is flawed. And I think this is kind of a theme across all sports, really, which is there are very basic stats that we all use and casual fans use and accept. And we know it's flawed, but we don't harp on the flaws because it's what we have. And then an advanced stat comes along. It does a better job of explaining something. It too is flawed. And so many people just say, yeah, but it's not perfect. And so this stat stinks. And then they go use the basic stats that are even more flawed. And so, like, if you just apply the same logic to everything and say, we know it's flawed, but we know how it's flawed, and therefore we can still, make some conclusions based off it, then you're always better off with the better data.
One of the things that we're working on at the rabbit hole now, if people have been watching the research show, you've seen how much the rabbit hole has improved, more stats, more filters, everything you need. One thing I want to work with is the live data on this, where you can basically take a shot level analysis of every player from every round. I think this would be particularly helpful in Showdown, but even try to find a couple guys, like when I spoke to Jeff, that you take a look at some of the players' championship numbers, and they could be thrown off by two really bad shots out of 250, whatever it might be. You know what I mean? That if you just hit the wrong shot at the wrong time, it could be potentially devastating and just tank all your strokes gain data, especially for guys that missed the cut, who only played 36 holes. That could really be one really terrible shot that took you out of it. And it'll just look like you have big negatives everywhere. That if we could find a way to take, hey, here are your 16 approach shots, here are your however many drives that you end up hitting throughout the course of a round, I want to work on a filter that be like, hey, give me high low. So take out the worst, take out the best, and now give me a new average on what is happening. Because that also protects against the high end when guys like Max, I mean, I was a victim of this last week, and I knew I was doing it, and it happened anyway, and he sucked. So that also didn't help. But Max Homa's approach numbers from the players, he hit his approaches really well. They were kind of propped up by him jarring it for eagle on the first hole of the week.
Definitely. And so, like, one thing you could do there is, instead of just eliminating the one that went in, just regress that too.
What if you call it to 5 feet?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good idea. And one of the things that we do at FTN with our showdown projections, and this has been, I think, a really big help, is to your exact point that you just made. I found that there's a lot more signal in tournament for someone who's driving the ball more accurately than they usually do than there is from someone who's driving the ball less accurately than they usually do, as measured by our strokes gain driving accuracy. And why is that? Because in order to gain strokes, in order to gain more strokes than usual through accuracy, you have to be making consistently good shots. over and over and over again, and you need to be avoiding the really bad misses, that's harder to do than it is for someone to lose more strokes than they usually do. Why? Because all it takes there is one really bad shot where it goes OB and they just lost 2 strokes with one swing, especially off the tee. Like, you can't really gain more than, I don't know, a third of a stroke with a great drive, especially not with accuracy. With accuracy, maybe you can only gain like 0.15 or something like that per shot. So in order to gain, it requires consistent success as opposed to, what it takes to have a really bad round, as you just said.
Well, let's dig into the DraftKings slate this week. I want to really try to hammer down on some SCOTTIE lineups. How popular do you think SCOTTIE's going to be as the only guy above $10,000? He's almost $5,000 more than the next closest guy.
I feel like we might see a really low number here.
Really? Because I think it's so easy to build SCOTTIE lineups.
Okay, well, maybe my mind will be changed as we kind of go through this exercise, because I haven't tried to really build many lineups yet, but my thought is this is like a new height of price for him. Let's see. Yeah, the previous high that we have seen was 14,500, but he was down at 14.3, then 14.1, then 14.2 in his last 3 events. And he just keeps playing worse. So the combination of worse form, people are becoming less and less confident in him with a new high in price tag. And my initial thought was that we're not going to have as many like high quality value guys, because this isn't a signature event, or this isn't the Players Championship type of field, where I don't know. My first instinct is like we could see 10% for SCOTTIE this week.
Well, if that's the case, I might have to push on him. Here's the lineup that could win right now. I just built it off the top of my head. Scheffler, Celinda, Howell, Yella Miraju, Toasty, Thorbjornsen.
I have no issue with this lineup. I don't think this is the type of lineup that people are going to play, though, because I don't think people are going to have enough conviction on guys like Celinda and Howell.
They should. And not that they're going to be good. I don't want to put that out into, maybe I do want to put it out into the ether. Who knows? These are all guys I bet on to win this tournament. The thing is, you got to pick your lane. And maybe this doesn't jibe with what you were looking at, but I went through this on the research. I think people are probably up like sick of me talking about it at this point, but I just put it up on the screen. Just sort me by ball speed and show me the guys who can do something else besides generate ball speed, and I'm in on you. Like, I've seen Celinda play well here. I've seen Toasty play well here. How much do you know about Mason Howell?
Very little.
He's the U.S. amateur champion. That's usually pretty good.
That I knew. What I mean is I don't know much about what he does well and what he does poorly.
Well, he generates a ton of ball speed. He's in between Pearson Cootie and Johnny Kiefer.
That I like. And that's kind of true of all juniors at this point. I think it's like any successful junior player, amateur player, you can bet that the ball speed is high relative to what it was 10 years ago.
But you can just kind of pick off these lower end guys that if this is the skill that plays the most, whether it be distance, ball speed, however it is that you want to sort it this week, I just think there are so many options from down low. And you don't have to play Scheffler with him. You could play, the other version of this lineup would be, let's see here. You go re-import that. You keep in Yella Miraju and Celinda, let's say. And we'll take out Scheffler. And then you can go like Goddard, Wyndham Clark, who I bet on Wyndham Clark this week. So that's always fun. That's always a losing bet. But
I bet on him last week, and boy, did that go well.
He missed the cut by a stroke. And because he couldn't putt.
It's been that same story for him for a while. I think the problem that I'm having with Wyndham is, remember when he won the U.S. Open, and the story was how he really like found something with this new sports psychologist, and it changed his approach to the game. There are things that I think are really encouraging about Wyndham's game right now, like the fact that his approach play has been outstanding, and that's another thing that we saw in that breakout season was the skill that he improved more than any other was his iron play, and so that is at least great to see. But it feels to me like he's getting frustrated in a way that he claimed that like the sports psychologist helped him not do anymore. And that is at least a little bit concerning to me, that he might have regressed from just like a mental standpoint of the game.
That's potentially true. You can see like the results haven't been there, but that approach play is pretty sexy.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. And when you combine that with the ball speed here, all we need is the putter to turn around. And now the counter to what I just said is, okay, but he's only frustrated if the really bad putting really continues. And I was making this point like in my Discord as I was following along, hopefully trying to inspire some confidence in Wyndham, which didn't work. But at least a lot of the putts that I saw him miss were really good putts that probably should have gone in. And so maybe there the frustration was more like he felt like he deserved the putts to go in and he still wasn't getting the results. Whereas it might have been actually like a little bit easier for him to digest the fact that nothing was going in if he knew that he wasn't putting well. But that is probably an encouraging thing that at least he was hitting putts that, he was hitting the putt the way he wanted. He was hitting the line that he was trying to hit it on, and the speed was good and all that stuff. So maybe that's a good indication the putting will turn around. And if it does, everything else about his game right now is perfect for this week.
And if you play him that each way market, you can get him at 80-1. Check this out, though. Houston Open. Boom. A lot of green on that screen and putting.
There is. I don't know how much weight I put into that, but it's certainly good to see how much he's gained off the tee here because we know the off the tee fits him so well on this golf course. So that's a very predictable outcome.
Yeah, it's just very good vibes at this course. It's funny that you mentioned that it was Clark that you saw. I felt on the weekend that happened to Brooks, that Brooks was hitting good putts and just lipping out or leaving it a rotation short.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed the same with him too.
So instead of using the Scottie in that lineup, we keep in Yella Miraju and Celinda as the two lower end guys. Then you can go Goddard, Kitayama, Thorbjornsen, Wyndham Clark. That's a lineup you can build. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is the type of thing that we'll see people favor just because it, similar theme to as we talked about the last few weeks, like it makes for a better weak link to the lineup and it allows more guys in the lineup that people have a lot of conviction on, right? Like it's hard to find a lot of guys that are around $7,000. Like you really feel great about, not that you don't think that they're good plays, but like you really kind of feel it in your bones that this guy's going to play well this week. You find that a lot more with guys in the $9,000 range. And so I think we'll see people try and stack that range again, which has been a kind of a growing trend throughout the season. And I think with the pricing the way it is this week, it's going to be even more so.
And it's probably been a very successful way to build lineups this year because those guys have been winning tournaments.
Yes, and Scottie's been doing poorly. So, like, if you've been paying up for Scottie this year, you have not been getting the results you need. Because I think part of what we have seen is even if you gave Scottie first place type DraftKings points so far this year, very often you'd still be better off with a more balanced build just because of how expensive he has become and how hard it is to build a lineup of 6 good players when you're using Scottie. And so combine that with the fact that he has not been good again, I think this is going to be the lowest ownership we've seen on Scottie this year.
So does that make you want to play him more or less?
It definitely makes me want to play him more, but wanting to play Scottie more than I have so far when I have had zero interest in playing Scottie at this point this season still doesn't mean that I'm using Scottie. And in fact, at the Players, that's the first time I used him all year, and I used him in one of 3 lineups, and it was only because I was doing an early late stack for one of my 3 lineups. And that was also, like, if you recall, that was, massive chalk in that wave other than Scottie. That was Fitz, Siwoo, Oberg, all of the most expensive guys on that slate were all from that wave. So using Scottie was just like the only way that I could be different within that wave stack.
So we'll have the ownership projections populated inside the Rabbit Hole Optimizer on Tuesday evening. However, if I had to sell you on 3 guys right now from $9,000 and above that work as perfect pivot plays, I can give them to you. Do you want to guess who the 3 are?
Burns.
1.
Nikolai.
No, I was going to say Fowler.
Okay. Yeah, Fowler
Adam
works
Scott.
too. Adam Scott is such a good play this week. His driving, like we really can't oversell it. What he has done with his ball speed is not just awesome from a data standpoint and from like an encouraging sign of wanting to use him this week, but just from like a pure fan of golf standpoint, it is so cool that someone at that age is becoming one of the fastest players on tour.
Yeah, he's now 13th in this field between Toasty and Kurt Kitayama.
That's awesome. That's just
ahead
so
of
cool.
Chris Goddard.
And the rest of his game fits it really well, right? Like he hasn't been a spectacular putter this year, but we know it's a skill that he has, and his approach play has been awesome this year.
So if you were to go between the 3 of those guys, it would probably be Adam Scott for you.
Yes, and I also love the Sam Burns call.
Yeah, it's just I know that it's we looked through the top of the odds board. Jeff and I did on Monday morning, and like he didn't realize that Ricky was in the field because he just looked through his name at 25-1, and then Burns is there. Everyone is just so much more exciting than Burns in this field around the same price point. Like Minwoo and Goddard are fun. Brooks, is he on the comeback? Knapp, is his back okay? He'd been playing so well before the Players. This is a great course for him. Kitayama on the up and up. Marco Penge, clearly Marco Penge is on the up and up. I hate so much that he played well at Valspar. It pisses me off.
Yeah, he would have been really low. Although he also would have been a lot cheaper.
Yeah, which would have been great.
9100
I was just concerned about the betting odds.
That's fair. Yeah, the betting odds really tank, but from a DraftKings price perspective, 9100 is really aggressive for him.
So what if you started like Scott and Penge? Like my numbers this week just point to one man and one man alone. Maybe I should just lock him in. Everything I've put in so far loves Chris Goddard.
Yeah, he's a very good play. There's like a slew of guys in the 8,000s who all look like spectacular plays. Rasmus, Keith, Wyndham, Thorbjornsen, like all these guys are great course fits. They make a ton of birdies. They're fairly priced at minimum. They might even be underpriced. So if you can build lineups that use as many of those guys as possible, where you don't even have to go down to the 7s or 6s very often, I think those lineups are going to project really well, and I'm going to like the looks of them as long as they're not too ownership heavy.
Well, is there anyone we can find from like the lower 7s? We can make that happen with Scott and Goddard. We can go one lower 7s guy, Goddard and Scott, then 3 8K guys. Because the 8K guys that I would be, I mean, I worry about Rasmus is that he can't really do any, like even his driving's been kind of suffering too. His putting has been keeping him together the entire year. Like Nikolai's doing everything kind of well. Although I have bet Nikolai again. It's funny that you had mentioned that you're betting these guys. Like I had been betting Fitz for weeks and then I stopped doing it at the Players. He almost wins there. And then I don't bet him at Valspar and then he ends up winning. It's happened a few times this year. The one guy that I've been continuously betting every week is Nikolai, and his results just keep getting worse now.
Well, just make sure you tell me when you're finally not betting him so that I can go bet him.
So like Clark and Cootie at the bottom. Now, at least it's with 74 per. This is where I don't mind like jumping back down. Like if we do have good signal on guys, even Jeff's buddy, Jesper Svensson rates out really well for a course like this. But I have no problem playing Toasty, or Celinda is probably my favorite of these guys from way down here. And then that gets us back up. Like a 5-1 onslaught, I think is pretty valuable here if you can get the right guys.
Yeah, Jesper's projecting well for us too, and I don't know how I feel about it, but that's going to make Jeff happy for sure. He's so much more talented than when he's shown on the PGA Tour so far, and I'm never one for big narratives, but one of the narratives that I do think has some weight is when guys come from Europe and they're in the States for the first time. It absolutely is an entire adjustment period just to what it's like living in a new country and making sure you have a home base and you're comfortable with the travel and all that stuff. And it definitely doesn't seem like he's there where, sometimes guys come over from the DP World Tour and immediately they're just fine. And they're as good as they were on the DP World Tour. Jesper's results have been consistently worse than his DP World Tour results. And I don't think it's just a form issue, because every time he goes back and plays a DP World Tour event, he does well again. So it does seem like there's a comfort hill that he needs to climb before we get to the guy that we saw on the DP World Tour the past few years. But that could come at any moment, and when you get a great course fit like this, it's certainly a good opportunity to get ahead of the curve on someone who's a lot better of a player than 6,800 in a field like this.
Yeah, we can't even get up to him from Celinda at this price, but the lineup would be Goddard and Scott. I think if you play, I think that's a nice match, because Goddard's going to be super popular. But if you play him with Adam Scott, not that Scott won't be popular, but he's in that middle ground enough where now I feel like your lineup's a little bit different. And this construction alone, despite using guys that are going to be popular, is not going to be a particularly common way that people build lineups.
Definitely agree. And yeah, I mean, this is cool because it's a balanced lineup, but you also, like, most people who are building balanced lineups are doing it so they don't have to play the 6,500 guy. So if you have someone that you do have conviction on down there, this is the type of lineup that is both really nice from the standpoint that you have 5 like really high quality players, and it's also a totally different lineup construction than what most people are playing.
Does Burns make sense here? I feel like he does. It's just I get that he doesn't hit his irons at all. Some weeks he does, most weeks he doesn't. But he's a big driver and he putts. Those two skills alone should be good enough to carry you through to hopefully, as you kind of mentioned before, luck into a good week in the other things. Minwoo did that last year. Like Minwoo had no iron game coming in, and he found it in Houston.
Yeah, and the other thing with Burns is like even when he's not hitting his irons well, we have seen him in the past just randomly spike with the irons plenty. Like he did it at Pebble Beach, right? He gained over a stroke per round with his irons, finished 6th. He finished 13th at the Players without even having a spike week with the irons. So you put him on a golf course that really fits his distance over accuracy skill set. It really fits the fact that he's probably the best putter in the world at this point. And you just still have the chance for an approach spike. I think he makes a ton of sense this week. He's definitely someone I'm going to be high on.
Yeah, even just to take a look at the putting hasn't been as consistent, but when he's putting well, when he gains a ton. And when he loses, he doesn't lose all that much, which is always nice. But you can see, the approach play has just been pretty bad. But based on what I was just looking at here, even if we go back to ball speed, like he's 26th in ball speed. There's not really a cutoff that I'm looking at this week in terms of miles per hour, but I basically want anyone who's inside the top 40 in ball speed this week.
Yeah, agree there. With the conversation we had earlier on Wyndham and Brooks this past week of like, yeah, they missed a lot of their putts, but all their putts seem to look good. Like that's Burns' floor. The worst his putting gets is that the ball doesn't go in, but every putt looks like it should go in. And so that's a really, really nice thing to have.
Have you ever played with anyone as slow as Adrian Dumont de Charette?
Yes, and it is as miserable as Fitzpatrick made it out to be.
I just find it crazy that I think it's great that Fitz went and told the marshals, like, listen, you got to speed this guy up. He's going to cost me a tournament.
I think it was awesome that he did that. And it was even better that he spoke about it candidly afterwards instead of, trying to preserve his feelings. Cause that kind of thing needs to be called out. It needs to be called out on every level. I'm fortunate that, I grew up playing in the Golf Association of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania Golf Association, where they have no tolerance for slow play whatsoever. I remember being in my last state amateur ever playing at Scranton Country Club. One of the guys in my group was a really good amateur young kid. He was like 5 years younger than me, and it was clear that he was going to be a really good player. And then this other guy who he spent 5 minutes talking with his caddy about which angle he wanted to chip out of fescue in while we were already on the clock because of how slow this guy was. And so we finally get to like the 17th hole and he's putting out. And he has like, I'm not exaggerating, a 12-inch putt. And he read it from both sides twice. Me and the other guy ran to the 18th tee and teed off. And as we're walking like down off the tee box to make the climb up the 18th fairway, we passed one of the rules officials who was timing our group. And we're about to say something to him, like pleading our case that, hey, this isn't our fault. And before we even said anything, the guy goes, just so you guys know, you guys are good. You're not going to get a stroke. If we do anything to your group, it's going to be him only. And like that took a ton of pressure off of us, but it's a real thing. And the thing that Fitzpatrick touched on that I loved, because I haven't heard many other pros like make this case, is if you are a faster player, if you're someone who is kind of aware of your surroundings, there's a pressure to keep your group in position, even when you are not the one who's causing the issue. And so like ADDC clearly didn't care about that. He's not feeling that pressure. That's not affecting him. It is affecting Fitzpatrick. And that's not how it should work. The guy who's being quote unquote penalized without any real penalty strokes should not be the one who's actually helping the group be in position. It should be the guy who's slowing them down. So I think that the tour needs to take Fitzpatrick's lead here and stop caring about people's feelings so much and actually penalize guys for that disgraceful of slow play.
It'll never happen to anyone good is the problem. Like they would never do this to listen, Cantlay's not as bad as we make him out to be. He's just the most prime example of players that are constantly on TV. Like there's some really slow players out there.
Yeah.
But like if it was someone who was like in contention, like he ended up falling back. He made like 2 triple bogeys. He was out of it. No one really cared what he was up to anymore. His only impact was on Fitzpatrick. However, if he was still in the tournament, there's no way they're going to penalize him a stroke if he's in it.
I think you're right. The The counter that I'd have is that I don't think guys like Cantlay are the issue. And if we ever get some kind of formal timing, um, data, I think that will show up. We think of the slowest players as the guys who take the most time from the time the camera gets on them to when they hit their shot. So Harmon with all the waggles, Cantlay because he shuffles his feet a million times before he hits the shot. But slow play is actually about the speed that you do all your prep work. So when it's your turn, are you ready to go through your routine? And if you are, even the slowest routines are going to be relatively like average at worst speed wise. The guys who are really slow are the ones it's their turn to putt and they're just now starting their routine of how to read the putt, let alone get into the putt, right? So when it's Cantlay's turn, he typically has his read already done, unless the through line was in his playing partner's way, and so he couldn't read that side of the putt yet, things of that nature. But if he goes up and shuffles a million times, he's still hitting that putt within 40 seconds. ADDC is still reading the putt 2 minutes later when he should have already hit it a minute and a half ago. So that is what Fitzpatrick called out when he said like not even being ready to hit your shot. As long as you can get into your routine, it doesn't matter how long your routine takes. You're not going to be that big of an issue when it comes to slow play.
All right, let's try to build. Well, what I want to go through here are the guys that we should just cross off, because based on everything we've talked about, maybe that there is some advantage to doing the contrarian thing and not using the big bombers. I don't think that any metrics would tell you that. So let's try to cross a few of these guys off here. And even when I spoke to Michael Kim, I think it was in like the second interview we did last year, I asked him about Houston. He's like, there's no reason for me to show up.
Yeah, there's that. I'll give a bit of a contrarian opinion here. I think the number one guy we should cross off is the bomber who's not good at anything else.
Yeah. So like the only one that I would give any credence to is Potgieter because of price, and I've seen him do it before.
Yeah. And to that nature, like at least with Potgieter, he's not a good putter in terms of just like his average strokes gained putting, but we've seen him get hot with the putter. So it's conceivable that this week he could make a lot of putts, and that keeps him from being eliminated from contention in my mind. From a pure data standpoint, like honestly, I think he's better than his stats because his stats are largely just about what he's done in the US. And we know that this is a better player than that. But Marco Penge, to this point, bomber, accurate off the tee. He's not even that bad in our strokes gained around the green estimate, but his approach and putting estimates are not good. So if a lot of people are flocking to him at 9,100, like that's someone that I'll fade. Now that doesn't mean that he's a bad outright bet or anything like that. But at $9,100, if he's chalk, he's someone that I could cross off the list because he's not good at the other things that you need to be good at.
He's not, but how much of that is what you had said before as it pertained to Jesper Svensson of maybe just he got sick the moment he moved to the States. He had to go to the hospital. He switched clubs. And last week he was hitting his irons pretty damn well. So that worries me that maybe it just took him 8 weeks to figure it out.
Yeah, he's also one of the guys that like we have seen him make a lot of putts like we did last week at the Valspar. I think your point about the club change is a really good one because that was something that I called out like at the beginning of the year that this is at least concerning to me. And I want to see how his approach play looks because in my opinion, if you're good off the tee, you're going to be good off the tee no matter what club is in your hand. But if you're the one that is hardest to adjust to and is most important that like you really find something that fits your golf swing is iron play. And so the fact that he finally had a good iron week at the Valspar, that it does give me pause. And so, like I said, if he was anybody else with that strokes gain profile, he'd be someone that I was crossing off the list. But because we have those added variables, I'm not just going to do that with him. Still, though, if the ownership is high, I'm not going to be playing Penge.
Would you expect him to be one of the higher owned guys?
I don't think so. I think people will be wary of the $9,100 price tag. I think if he were $8,100, that he'd be one of the more popular guys, though.
So I'm good with crossing off Fowler here. Kind of rooting for him to do well to get into the Masters, but he just doesn't fit exactly the profile that I want. Neither does English, Griffin, Lowry, Harry Hall. Gerard should be good, but he can't chip or putt, so let's just throw him off the list. Day, probably not. Cootie, yes. Stevens, no. Pendrith, yes. Smalley, no. Jaeger, yes. Rye, no. Zalatoris hasn't played since the Farmers, in case people were wondering.
Yeah, and his ball speed has not really been there since the injury. So the one guy I'll push back on is Fowler. And the reason I'll push back there is because we basically have these like three skill sets that are really predictive this week. We've got distance off the tee, approach play, and putting. Fowler checks two of those three boxes. And if we looked at other players who check a different two of three, guys who are really long and can make putts, but they're not good with their irons, or they're really long and they're good with their irons, but they don't make putts, we'd have a lot more interest. And so I think the prevailing narrative and the thing that's going to drive ownership is, do you hit the ball really far? And because Fowler doesn't check that box, I think there's a chance that he ends up really low owned, but he does the other things that can lead to not just success here, but really high results where you're climbing the leaderboard. And so he's someone who could end up really like slipping through the cracks in a way that makes me interested this week. Whereas the other guys that you mentioned, like Harry Hall, he only has one of those three skill sets. He's not a good iron player. He obviously doesn't have the distance. I'm much more comfortable crossing him off the list.
Sure. I guess my point would be, and maybe that's more of an outright betting conversation, that Fowler, opposed to the other guys around him, all the other guys surrounding him on this board do the thing well that you need to do well here.
Yeah, and that's one of the difficulties, and honestly, like this is one of the evergreen type of DFS discussions is how contrarian do you get when the guy is surrounded by players who have a high probability of success, and so that too is one of the variables I'm going to be looking at. It's not like if Fowler's 5% or 8% that I'm automatically going to be playing him. He's got to be clearly under-owned when the guys around him are being clearly over-owned. So like, let's say, for example, that all of Knapp, Kitayama, and Nikolai are 25% and Fowler's 5%. Now, are they 5 times more likely to succeed than he is? No. Okay, now we'll give Fowler a chance. But if Fowler's under-owned, but Nikolai and Knapp are also under-owned and are better fits for the course, even if they're not quite as low-owned as Fowler, I'm still going to end up playing those guys who are even better fits for the course.
I think the Fowler point that you're making is the case that I would just make for Burns, and I'd rather play Burns.
Great point. I think I'm with you there too.
Yeah, it's just he's $300 more, so you have to adjust somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you started a team with Burns, I can now do whatever the hell you want. From down the list, either in the 7s or the 6s, who does stand out to you as great plays? Like Woodland is going to be popular at $7,400. He's first in ball speed, second here last year, coming off a good week. Makes a ton of sense, right?
Yes. Grazerman also stands out. And then I don't know if I'm going to have... I think I will have conviction on this guy. Tony Finau, $7,600. We haven't seen the ball speed, but I got to think that it still exists somewhere, and he's starting to play a lot better golf, and he's still one of the highest volatility guys, which, as you know, makes me pretty excited.
Former winner of this event. He's 25th in ball speed this year.
Okay, so that's actually higher than I was assuming because his strokes gained driving distance has not been good. So maybe that just means that he's been a little bit more conservative than he's been in the past, or it could also be that he's not driving the ball well, so he's consistently, getting knocked down by a tree and costing himself distance that way.
Haotong is on that list too. And if I put my theory into play about linksy style around the greens, those are the courses where Haotong plays really well. And I think people are kind of off his scent now that he had some bad weeks in a row. I still like him here, though.
Yeah, I like that call. It might be too much Finau talk, but one other thing I like about Finau is we have seen videos in the past where like we know for a fact that he is swinging at like 80% capacity of his top speed most of the time on tour. And so you put him on a golf course where it's clear and obvious that you can't get hurt that much from inaccurate swings. Maybe that makes him use 90% of capacity this week. And all of a sudden he is one of the longest guys in the field. And so that like possibility also really intrigues me with him.
Patrick Rogers coming off a bad week, but it was secretly a pretty good week when you start taking a look at the numbers. Very good on approach play, and just some bad drives killed him, which it happened to a lot of guys at Valspar. So he could be back on the list. But as we keep going down, like I wanted to be on Michael Brennan a lot here, especially at a big driver heavy course. And maybe I will for DraftKings, but he's just not doing anything else right now.
Yeah, the rest of his game just doesn't look like it's there. And actually, like the approach play had been good for a few events in a row, and it looked really good at the Players, and it was just he loses strokes every single event, both on and around the greens. And then the approach play was also bad at the Valspar. So now it's like, okay, I was with you because we kind of talked about it, like I think at the Players, maybe even at the Valspar, where it just wasn't the course for him. He played a number of events in a row where it just wasn't the course for his game. Now we do get to a course where at least from the distance perspective, like this does fit him a little bit better. But I'm with you. The rest of the game just it's not good enough. He's basically pot gator at this point from a just like a pure, strokes game profile perspective, except a worse putter.
Yeah, I don't mind using him in a few lineups because this just is a much better course fit than anything that we've looked at for him in a while. I mean, Puerto Rico was an excellent fit for him, and he did well there until the weekend. He just couldn't make any putts from basically what I could see because that's the only data I have to go on because there are no strokes gain data. Potgieter's really weird. Look where he hit his approaches well this year. Long course, Genesis. Long course, Farmers. And that's where the putter actually kind of coincided with what he did well too. Like when I ran through those comp courses earlier, be it Farmers, Mexico, Detroit, like these are all places where he's done awesome.
Yeah, I like that. And this is way too small of a sample to say with him, but there also seems to be like maybe a little bit of a phenomenon with him where he makes putts when he's actually hitting the ball well. And it's just like his putting is purely a product of how confident he's feeling on that day. And so you put him on a golf course where the distance really gives him an advantage and he's hitting the irons well. And all of a sudden some putts are going to fall.
So Potgieter, Brennan, I think the popular one outside of Woodland is going to be Yella Miraju. His odds have already sort of tanked for this week, but he sets up really well for this course.
Do you have a great sense so far of like what he does really well? Because I can't say that I do.
He crushes it off the tee.
Yeah.
My dad told me he reminds him of Akshay. I was like, why is that, Dad?
Well, guess what, Dad? You got to reevaluate what Akshay does well because he does not crush it off the tee.
He's like, yeah, he just reminds me of Akshay. I was like, yeah. I wonder why. Wonder why that is.
If only we knew.
Let's just try to take a look at his profile here. Like, 12th in club head speed, 17th in ball speed. He just rips as hard as he can at the ball. And dude can putt from time to time. Like it's either so far this year, like the putter has been really good. And the approach play is really like, this is a good looking stat profile.
It really is. Yeah. And I do think he's being helped a little bit from the fact that like some of these rounds where he didn't play as well were rounds where he didn't have shot link data, but still it's pretty intriguing. And the thing I definitely like is that it's not just that he's long off the tee. He's very clearly long and accurate off the tee. And that is a huge plus for sure.
And these are the type of guys that we like to invest in. I mean, yes. I enjoyed investing in Chris Goddard up until he actually started winning events. I wasn't on him then. I was on him right before that when he wasn't winning events. But this is the stat profile you want. Can you find players that are long off the tee, that hit fairways, that can competently do other things? That's what he's been doing.
Yeah, he's definitely a good fit in that regard.
So in the sixes, I'm just going to keep scrolling here to just, if you want to point out anyone that stands out. Matty Schmidt stands out to me a little bit. Jesper Svensson, as we talked about. The issue is that it's going to be very easy to identify which guys are which from this lower category. How do you parse that for DraftKings? Like, people are going to know Jesper Svensson is a good play. I think at least people are going to go with Toasty, especially coming off a good week last week and the success that he's had here in the past. People will get back on Clanton. I'm going to pass on that. Him and Kiefer after going double digits over par in 2 rounds. But Celinda is kind of a perfect guy for this. Maybe people get on Vegas this week. People will be on Lamprecht and Mason Howell just because they bomb it off the tee. What do you do in weeks like this? Or just don't pay that any attention because not enough people are going to go down to this area. Not enough people are going to go down to the $6,000 range anyway, that it just doesn't matter.
I think you nailed it there, where you're probably right that anyone scrolling through the 6,000s is going to identify Jesper as one of the better plays in this range because of the course fit and just the talent that we know is there. But that doesn't mean that a lot of people are actually going to play him. He's probably going to be like a maximum of, 5% owned, something like that. So it just doesn't matter. And especially that's especially true if you're not using SCOTTIE, because if you're not using SCOTTIE, then even fewer people are needing to go dip down into the $6,000 range. So like maybe he's, 5% overall and 15% in SCOTTIE lineups. But if you're not using SCOTTIE, then who cares about that? So yeah, I think the move is just play whoever you feel really confident in down here. And I would also say down here, this is another place where I'll really make the point that I made about Ricky, which is it's probably beneficial, as well to look for guys who are very good with their irons and are very good putters, but aren't bombers off the tee, because those guys are the ones who are probably going to be the most overlooked down here. So he's coming off a missed cut, but Eric Cole is, I think, pretty intriguing down here. If you can get a good iron week from Denny McCarthy,
He
he's
just had
potentially
one.
a really good play. Yeah.
He just had one and didn't do shit with it.
Yeah. It's weird. Like, he's actually going through a stretch where the putting isn't great. And I mean, he gained half a stroke per round. He was T26, so it's not like he was bad this past week. If you got a 26th place finish from Denny this week, would you be happy with it at, what is he, $7,000 and let's say 2% owned?
Yeah, probably.
I think so too. So yeah, I think like Denny and Eric Cole, that type of player is probably going to be under owned this week for sure.
All right. Well, let me just take a look here. I just kind of ran through. I just listed them all at 33% of 33% ball speed, 33% approach, and then 34% putting, just to get a visualization.
Mm-hmm.
And not that those weights mean anything, but just who highlights well in all of these versus how much money are they going to be this week. And it's most of the good players in the field. Nikolai, Rasmus, Yella Miraju, 1, 2, 3 on that list. But as we start going down, Eric Cole, 19th in approach, 25th in putting, 97th in ball speed. So Minwoo is kind of the exact opposite of this. And we got lucky last year that he hit his approach as well.
Yep.
Theegala is interesting too.
Theegala is interesting. I don't know what to think of him coming off that last week. That was embarrassing. And of course, I had him in my lineup as a high probability play, and he was atrocious. The name that stands out to me, and maybe this is just because I had him in one of my round 4 lineups, I think this was 2 years ago, that made me a ton of money, is Nick Dunlap.
He's just been so bad.
Yeah, he sure has.
Like, there's not any one thing he's doing well at the moment.
Yes, that to me, like, that's the biggest concern. And actually, it's so funny if you look at Data Golf's player profiles, they have these like horizontal bars that show how well a guy has done, and it's hilarious because they're all scaled to the worst, or like the largest bar of any week. And so because he's been so bad at times with his driver, like he lost 4.4 strokes per round at the Masters, for example, with his driver. All the good things that he does, like gaining 0.72 with the approach player, 1.04 putting at the Valspar, look like tiny gains because they are minuscule compared to how much he's lost with his driver at times. The only thing that's a little bit potentially positive is that at this course, he can't be killed by the accuracy the way he is on most golf courses. The bad part of that is he's also been really, really short off the tee of late. And I could not tell you if that's because he's clubbing down or because he's changed his swing, trying to get some control over the driver. I have no idea, but it's really, really concerning just how awful he is off the tee.
Ball speed over the past 4 months, he's still 27th in this field.
So yeah, that's at least a good sign. I think this is also like one of the reasons why I love looking at stats that are like, okay, what's his 80th percentile ball speed or 60th percentile, instead of just looking at the average, because the average is also going to show you a lot of, 3-woods that he hit or 4 irons off the tee that he hit, things of that nature.
Well, the other thing too is that his distance could be down because he's hitting houses.
Yes. I mean, he's hitting tree after tree after tree.
I played him, the last time he was good was his top 10 at Cabo, and I played him first round leader that week, and he did hit first round leader. He chopped it, so 200 down to 100, no big deal. This seems like a spot to play him as first round leader, if it was me.
And I think to your point there, like, probably better showdown play than a main slate play as well. So right on the kind of same wavelength there.
All right, Blickle, your link to the Discord is in the description. It didn't work for a guy last week. You can always hit the comment section or the description, because sometimes the links get truncated and then they don't work anymore. Thanks, YouTube, for all of that.
I think the issue actually wasn't in the description. I think the link was actually the link to the Discord server itself, which I updated, and now it should be working.
Okay, excellent. So if you want to do that, you can hop in there. I've been, I kind of mushed your NBA plays. They were going great. Like you said, 22 and 23. Then I jump in, and then we had a few good days that were great. Then a lot of split days, but I guess that's just how it goes, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you're doing, 3-pick plays, things of that nature, if you have as many good days as bad days, you're going to make quite a bit of money over time. So it's still been great.
All right, so everyone can go check that out. You can use the rabbit hole. You saw me bring it up on the screen today. That's also down in the description, betspertsgolf.com/Mayo to check that out and get yourself a discount because Masters is coming and it's coming soon. So I'd highly recommend that you get familiarized with the product and try to win some of those $1 million prize pools that are happening at the Masters. All right, smash a like on the way out, and I will see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!